السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. يا غريب يا مظلوم يا شهيد كربلاء. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم. God states in the Holy Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. And the believing men and the believing women are protectors of one another. They enjoin good and they discourage evil, and they establish prayer and they give charity, and they obey God and His Messenger. It is they whom God will have mercy upon. Indeed, God is magnificent and wise. Amanna billah, sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. Let us begin by enlivening our hearts and minds and gathering with the remembrance of the Holy Prophet and his purified progeny. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin. As human beings, we are, by our very nature, social beings. This means that, among other things, that we live with others in the world, and that it is others and our living with others and interactions with others that are necessary for our very survival. For us to survive as beings, we need one another. In fact, it's not just necessary for our survival, but for us to thrive. We thrive in community and we thrive in society. And it is for this reason why we expend a lot of effort and resources in building our social relations, our relations with others around us. But social relations can also sometimes be a cause for problems, for unhappiness, and for conflict. And this is why it's important for us to consider how to maintain social relations that are healthy and productive. Not just to build social relations, but to ensure that our social relations and our relationships are productive and are healthy relationships. And healthy relationships, dear friends, they begin first and foremost with a healthy understanding of an interaction with oneself. I can't expect others to understand me if I don't understand myself. I can't expect others to value me if I don't value myself. I can't expect others to love me if I don't love myself. And I don't mean this in sort of the egotistical sense, but in a sense that I respect myself. I value myself. And it is when I value and respect myself, then others will also value me and they will respect me. I'm setting the stage for that interaction. So these healthy relationships, they begin first and foremost with a healthy understanding of and interaction with oneself. Now tonight, I'd like to share with you, inshallah, some principles for building and maintaining healthy social relationships. And I'd like to focus on 4 points tonight. Number 1 is the issue of intentionality. That we should be intentional when it comes to our connections and when it comes to building our relationships. Connection is important. After all, we're social beings. We need connection. But we should not connect with others just for the sake of connecting. One of the things that social media does for us in this day and age is that it challenges this sense of intentionality, and sometimes it destroys the sense of intentionality when it comes to our networking and our connections and our relationships. Because social media operates in a way where it always encourages us to connect more and more and more. It pushes us and it encourages us to gain more friends, to follow more people, to gain more connections and more network when it comes to expand your network, when it comes to your relations. This is the very nature of social media. This is how it operates. This is how many of the social media sites, they operate. And this is why you'll find that whatever social media platform you use, that you will always receive recommendations for more people to follow, right? Social media platforms have recommendations. They tell you, oh, you might be interested in so-and-so. They have a quote-unquote for you section, right? People whom you otherwise would not follow, or you would otherwise not come across, social media pushes them to the forefront. Why? Because the point is to encourage you to connect more, for more people to connect. So what it does essentially is it strips away, or it challenges the sense of being very intentional when it comes to my connections. It's always encouraging me to connect for the sake of connection. But we have to be very careful with our relationships, dear friends. We have to be very careful with whom we connect and for what reasons. I always have to ask myself, why am I connecting with this person? Why am I following this person? What is the purpose? What is the objective of this connection that I do? Whether in social media or in real life. Why am I establishing this friendship? Why am I looking to make this social relationship happen? To be intentional. To think about it. To think about the objectives and the purposes. Because not all relationships are useful or beneficial for us, dear friends. Some are harmful. Some destroy us. Sometimes without us even noticing immediately. Sometimes you immediately notice, right? You're establishing a relationship with someone, could be a friend, could be a potential spouse, whatever it may be, and immediately you notice red flags and you stay away, you cut off the relationship. Sometimes that relationship operates in a way where unconsciously it is harming you or it is harming the other side without you necessarily explicitly and apparently realizing. It's only after a while where you realize, you say, oh, this relationship is destroying me. This relationship is full of problems. So not all relationships are useful or beneficial. Some are harmful. This is why we have to be very intentional. This is why when it comes to our teachings, the Quran and the traditions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, they always caution us to be very careful with our selecting people to whom we connect with and we develop relationships with. They tell us to be very careful when it comes to selecting friends. Who you decide to be your friend, who you bring into your life. They tell us to be very cautious when it comes to selecting your spouse, for instance. So many traditions. For many of us, we find that this issue of selecting a friend or a spouse is quite a simple process, right? What does this person like? Do they like the same things that I like? Do they have the same interests, right? A lot of people, they develop friendships, and this happens among many of our youth, my brothers and sisters, right? That oftentimes I develop a friendship because what? Because the other side likes the same things that I like. He likes to play basketball, I like to play basketball, that's it, we've made a connection, we're friends, right? They like to play Fortnite or Call of Duty or Minecraft, or I don't know what the latest popular game is. And I like to play this game, that's it, we're friends. Khalas, we're best buddies. Because of a particular interest or a like that I have. Or sometimes when it comes to selecting a spouse, right? Sometimes we think, well, you know, she loves traveling to Europe. I love traveling to Europe. She loves sushi. I love sushi. And that's enough for me when it comes to desires and likes and dislikes. And so I establish a relationship just based on those things. But when it comes to our teachings, they tell us, be very, very cautious. Be very intentional when it comes to selecting your friend, when it comes to selecting your acquaintance, when it comes to selecting your spouse and other person to connect with. In fact, the Quran gives us examples of those whom on the Day of Judgment, they will regret some of their relationships. The Quran says, وَيَوْمَ يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا يَا وَيْلَتَهْ لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أَتَّخِذْ فُلَانًا خَلِيلًا لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي. Quran says, on the Day of Judgment, some people, وَيَوْمَ يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ, when the oppressor will bite his hand. What does it mean to bite your hand? It's symbolic of what? Symbolic of regret and remorse. In some cultures, when you bite your hand, means that you're regretful, you're remorseful, right? So the Quran says there are some who will express this remorse, this regret on the Day of Judgment, and they will say, oh, woe unto me. Why did I take so and so as my friend in the life? They pushed me away from the truth. They diverted me away from the straight path. They turned me towards that which was harmful for my spirituality and for my heart and for my soul and for my dunya and for my akhirah. They turned me away. Right? And we know that peer pressure is powerful. It's powerful. Peer pressure is when we engage in behavior or we do an activity because of the influence of our friends. Even if sometimes I don't want to do it. Sometimes I know that it's wrong, right? But because all of my quote-unquote friends are doing it, my social circle is doing it, what happens? I feel pressured. Oh, I have to do this too. Right? And the Quran reminds us, do not bow down to peer pressure. Do not allow others to misguide you to push you away from the path of truth. We have to be very careful, dear friends. And I insist and I remind my friends of this, especially my younger brothers and sisters. Be very careful. Not everyone is worth calling a friend. A friend is a very honorable person. It's a very honorable title to bestow upon someone. Value yourself, understand yourself, respect yourself to the point that you don't just allow anyone to be your friend. Not just because they have the same likes as you or the same hobbies as you. You have to make sure that they have good values. You have to make sure that they are not going to drive you away and push you in a bad direction, that they will help and uplift you. They're not just going to encourage you for whatever you do, anything you do, whether it's right or wrong, they will cheer you on. They will say, yeah, good job. That's not good. That's not a good friend. A good friend is someone who encourages you when you do something good, and if you, God forbid, you're about to do something bad, they say, hey, hold on. Rethink this. This isn't a good idea. This is a true friend. Yeah, we know a lot of people. We may have acquaintances, we may have classmates, we may have colleagues at work, people that we know, but not everyone is worthy of being a friend. This is why I mentioned that it's important that we first understand ourselves and we respect ourselves and value ourselves before we make our social connections. Because if I value and respect myself, others will value and respect me too. But if I don't value and respect myself, others are not going to respect me. They're not going to value me. So it's very important, number one, that we are intentional in our social relationships, in choosing who we connect with and how we build these relationships. This is number one. Number two is that we realize that there is no such thing as a perfect relationship. There is no perfect marriage. There is no perfect friendship. There is no perfect parent-child relationship. Why? Because each and every single one of us here is what? Is in one way or another imperfect. We are fallible. We forget, we make mistakes, we make errors, we slip. Everyone does that. Infallibility only belongs to the prophets and the imams and the Ahlul Bayt and those whom God has designated. Other than them, everyone else is fallible. And so, whom you will find around you is a variety of imperfect people. Right? So we have to let go of this fantasy that we have of a perfect relationship, a perfect marriage, a perfect partnership, a perfect friendship. It doesn't happen. We are always dealing with imperfect people, including ourselves. I am imperfect. I have flaws. I make mistakes. And so it's important for me to then find others who are imperfect, who can balance out my imperfections. I balance out their imperfections, they balance out my imperfections. Essentially, to find the perfectly imperfect person for you. We have to let go of this fantasy of perfect relationships. This is why it's important for us not to focus solely on the negative actions and behavior of people. Because in this ideal that we have of having the perfect union between two people, the perfect relationship between two people, sometimes as we pursue that, this false kind of ideal, what we end up doing is that we focus on the negative traits and the negative behaviors and actions of people. We're always criticizing people. You did this wrong, you did that wrong, you forgot this, you forgot that. You messed up here, you've slipped there, right? Sometimes we find us doing this, right? Some parents, for instance, they focus on the negative traits or the negative behavior of their children all the time. They're always focusing on the negative. They never turn to their children and encourage them and praise them for the good things they do. They're always criticizing them. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Some spouses do the same. Husband is always criticizing his wife. Wife is always criticizing her husband, always focusing on the negative. When we focus only on the negative of people, then no one is ever good enough for us. No one is ever good enough for us. We're never satisfied. We're never happy. And we will always be disappointed in people. And this will destroy our sense of self, and it will destroy our relationships with others. So we should not focus solely on the negative. Rather, we should encourage one another. Encourage one another, uplift one another, help one another. This is what the Quran says. وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. The believing men and the believing women, they are protectors, they are guardians, they are helpers of one another. يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. They enjoin, they encourage one another to do good. They discourage one another from doing bad. Essentially, what do? We encourage one another. We help one another grow and evolve and become better. That encouragement helps our relationships. It helps us live in an imperfect world with imperfect people. So that we are on a journey towards God. We try to minimize our imperfections. We learn from one another. We are encouraged by one another. Brothers and sisters, I recommend that you all try the following activity. Either with a friend, or with a spouse, or with your children or family members. The following activity. Next time you're together, have each person in your group, each person in your family, parents, children, for instance, each person describe one characteristic or one attribute that is positive about everyone else in that group and why it's inspirational for them. So father describes one attribute or one characteristic is good about his wife, the mother, and each of the children. And everyone else does the same about everyone else. Identify one positive attribute and why it's inspiring for you. I promise you, brothers and sisters, this activity will be a remarkable activity for you. It will be very uplifting and inspirational for you as a family. Between spouses, between friends. It's encouraging. Because people are encouraged. They are reminded of why they are valued and for what reason they are valued. And it encourages everyone else to try to mimic, also to learn from that person. It's a very beautiful activity. It helps us to encourage one another and to grow with one another. So this is number 2. Realize that there are no perfect relationships in this world. Number 3. Do not compare your relationships to others' relationships. It's tempting to compare ourselves to others. It's tempting to compare those who we know to others. We often find this, right, with parents, right? Parents like to compare their children to other children. Say, well, you know what? Uncle so-and-so, his kids, they did really good in chemistry. Why can't you do well in chemistry? Huh? We're smiling. Everyone is smiling here because we know we all do it. Right? Or a wife tells her husband, you know, my friend, you know what her husband did for her on her birthday? Or vice versa. Right? You know what my friend did for me? You know what that other person did? We compare our relationships to the relationships of others. This is one of the biggest mistakes that we can make in this life, dear friends. Don't compare your relationship to others' relationship. Why? Because every relationship is unique in itself. Every single relationship. No two relationships are the same. Even within a family. Is your relationship with your spouse the same as your relationship with your child? Is your relationship with one child the same as your relationship with another child? No. Each relationship by itself is unique. And this is why instead of comparing our relationship to others' relationship, rather what we need to do is to build our own unique relationship. Focus on building your relationship in a unique way that works for your relationships. This is what we need to expend our time and effort in doing. Because all relationships, they evolve. Like I said, nothing perfect exists. All relationships, they have their ups and they have their downs. Right? And what we see in other people's relationships does not necessarily reflect the whole picture or reality. Sometimes we see other people's relationships on social media, right? We all post. I went with my family on vacation, I posted it online. I did this with my friend, we went out for coffee, I posted it online. I show what I like to show. Most people, not all people, most people usually, they don't post or they don't inform the world about the imperfections and the problems in their relationships. We focus on what? On that which is glamorous, on that which is good, on that which is beautiful. So when we compare, when we see what we see online or on TV, or even when we go to our friend's house, they host us for dinner. You're there for an hour, 2 hours. What you're seeing is not the whole picture. Every relationship has its ups and downs. And so when we compare ourselves to others, when we compare our relationships to other relationships, the only thing that comes out of this is disappointment. Because you're trying to reach for something that is a fantasy. It's not the whole picture. You're not getting the whole idea. We all have problems and issues in our relationships. We don't like to admit it, but they're all there. So we should not compare ourselves to others. It will only disappoint us and discourage us. This is number 3. And finally, number 4. The 4th point is that relationships, successful relationships, are all about giving and taking. Giving and taking. Many of us, we expect to always be on the receiving end. I'm always looking for a good friend, someone who is going to be a good friend to me. In a potential spouse, I am looking for a spouse who is going to be good for me. Right? I want my parents to be good to me. I want my children to be good to me. We're always looking and expecting to be on the receiving end of other people's goodness. But a successful relationship is one that is reciprocal. It's back and forth. Relationship is not made of one side. It's a two-sided thing. And so, while it's important that I expect certain things, that I expect to receive, I also have to ensure that I am giving as well. I don't only search for that friend who can do me good, but I also be a good friend to others. Be a good friend to others. Your friend is kind, they're generous, they invite you over, they support you, they listen to you, but you don't make the time to listen to them or support them. When you need them, you call them 1,000 times. You keep calling them, right? And you expect them to answer, and you expect them to come to your assistance immediately, to drop everything, and to come to help you. But what about when they need you? Do we reciprocate? Am I also a good friend to others? Am I also supportive of others? Am I also kind and generous to others? Do I also give in the same way that I expect to take? When it comes to our marriages, relationships between spouses, right? We're always looking for someone who can take care of me, Parents want to find a spouse for their child who will take care of their child, who will be good to their child and possibly good to them as well. Right? But how many of us are thinking of encouraging our children to also be a good spouse to others? We look for a good partner. Am I a good partner myself? People, they always come and they say, well, you know what? In this day and age, marriage has become so difficult. I can't find a suitable spouse. Men say, oh, I can't find a good wife. None of the women are good anymore. Women say, oh, I can't find a good husband. None of the men are good anymore. Right? We're always expecting to find that person who's going to take care of me. Some people, they go in different direction. They begin to pronounce, oh, if only I could find someone like Fatima al-Zahra. If only I could find someone like Khadija al-Kubra. You will find someone like Fatima al-Zahra once you become someone like Amir al-Mu'mineen. You will find Khadija al-Kubra once you become someone like Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I can't just expect to find someone who's always going to give me and build me and support me. I have to also support. If I want a good wife, I have to be a good husband. If I want a good friend, I have to be a good friend. If I want a good sibling, I have to be a good sibling. If I want to be a good parent, I have to expect that the child is good to me and I am good to them, and vice versa. I remember a while back in Southern California, during one of my programs in one of the centers there, an elderly man came to me. He approached me after the program. And he said, listen, Sayyid, I want to talk to you. Sure. He said, I've become very old. I'm ill, I'm sick, I'm dealing with a lot of health issues. I can barely move around. I have other issues. And he explained to me all of his health concerns and health issues. And he said, at the same time, my wife has also become old. It's not just him, his wife also became old. And she's dealing with a host of health issues. And recently, she slipped and she fell and she hurt her leg and her back. And so he's explaining to me, he's saying, we live alone, it's just me and my wife. Our kids have, gone. They've gotten married and they've gone away and they're living their lives. And so he was explaining to me his situation and he said, I find a lot of difficulty now in this phase of our life, especially because my wife has difficulty moving around. And so now, he says, the house is a mess. He says, we don't have her, she's not getting up and cooking any food. And then he turned to me and he said, and Sayyid, this is really tough for me. Because during my whole marriage, never one day in my life did I ever pick up a plate from the table. You live with your spouse, and you, with all due respect to this man, I feel for him, but this is what a marriage is. This is what a partnership is. That I expect only to be served. I am the king, I sit on my throne, and everyone around me serves me. Is this what I expect? Is this what builds love and it builds connection? And is this what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is this the sunnah and the tradition of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi? Or the tradition of Amir al-Mu'mineen, or the tradition of the rest of the prophets or imams? They show us what it means to be a good partner. A successful relationship is reciprocal. We don't expect just to take, we have to give. We contribute as well. A successful relationship, no matter what kind of relationship it is, between friends, between spouses, between parents and children, whatever kind of relationship it is, A successful and a healthy relationship is one in which it is based primarily on the ability of both sides to sacrifice. To sacrifice. To sacrifice what? To sacrifice individual pleasures. To sacrifice individual and personal goals. To sacrifice individual and personal time. I have to be able to sacrifice. Of course, each and every one of us, we have our dreams, our personal dreams, our desires, our aspirations, our pleasures, what we want to, our thoughts. And if, imagine that both sides, they both want to enforce their own personal thoughts and their own personal objectives and their own personal aspirations, there's definitely going to be a clash. Healthy and successful relationship is when we are willing to sacrifice. We meet halfway. You are going to sacrifice and I am going to sacrifice, and we're going to meet halfway. We're going to sacrifice our personal wants and desires. For what? For the sake of this relationship. For the sake of one another, so that we can help one another grow. We can help one another achieve. So to sacrifice, and to sacrifice enormously, and to sacrifice everything except to sacrifice one thing. Never to sacrifice your values. Never to sacrifice your values. You give people your time, you give them your resources, you give them your attention, but never give away your values, brothers and sisters. Because without our values, we are nothing. Without our foundations, without our principles, we are nothing. It's like someone who is wandering around in the world, who's lost. Imagine yourself, you go to a foreign place, a new place, somewhere you've never visited before, right? And you have no sense of direction. There's no Google Maps, there's no Apple Maps, there's no Waze, there's nothing, no navigation, right? And you're put in the middle of that town and that city. How do you find your way? If you don't have a sense of direction, a sense of purpose, if you don't have a blueprint, if you don't have a roadmap, you'll be wandering morning to night. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to see. You don't know how to get from point A to point B. Without our values, without those values that are grounded in God, that are grounded in God's teachings and what God wants for us, then we are lost. And we should never give up those values, brothers and sisters. Never give up those values. No matter what kind of situation you're in. Many of our relationships, they fail because we give away our values. Because we compromise on our values. Yes, sometimes there might be an immediate gain, an immediate benefit, but in the long term, there is absolutely no gain. In fact, there is a loss. So we compromise everything in a successful relationship or for a successful relationship except our values. And thus it's important for us, brothers and sisters, to consider, really give it time and energy and thought. How do we build healthy relationships? How do we build productive relationships? To be intentional, number one. Number two, to realize that there is no perfect relationship. Number three, that we never compare our relationships to others' relationships. And number four, that we sacrifice, that we give and we take. And to always keep our values in front of us. And when it comes to building our relationships. The Imam's companions, his friends, Imam Hussein's companions, were the best of companions. He himself says this. He says, there were no companions like my companions. Why? Because even his grandfather, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he had people who had accompanied him. But the Quran tells us. This is not someone making it up. The Quran itself says that there were some people who surrounded you, Ya Rasulullah, who were expert hypocrites. They were experts in their hypocrisy. They claimed companionship and friendship to the Prophet, but they betrayed the Prophet. But the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they sacrificed everything they had for the sake of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, except what? They did not sacrifice their values. This is why they were the best of companions. On the eve of Ashura, the night before Ashura, imagine the scene in the camp of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. His camp, his followers in their tents on the one hand, and on the other hand you have the tents of the Umayyad army under the command of Umar ibn Sa'd. And the traditions, those who relate the traditions, reports, they say that in the camp of Umar ibn Sa'd, it was a festive occasion. People were enjoying themselves. They were partying. They were having fun. They were spending the night, enjoying themselves. And on the side of Imam Hussein, in the camp of Imam Hussein, was heard the buzzing like the buzzing of bees. People were in prayer. And they were seeking forgiveness. And they were reciting Quran. And they were devoting themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Hussein, he comes on that night, he comes to his followers, his companions, he gathers them. And he says to them, he says, here we are. Tomorrow is the 10th of Muharram. And tomorrow is the day. There are no negotiations anymore. There is no turning back. And this group has destined, and they are certain that they want to wage war. But let me tell you something. He tells them, you see this large army on the other side? They are all after me. I am their objective. They only want me. They do not want any of you. They're not after any of you. And so tonight, he says to them, in the darkness of this night, I give you permission, any of you, any one of you who wants to leave tonight, to go back to your families, to go back to your business, to go back to your lives. Any one of you who wants to go back, go back. And I will not hold you accountable at all. My love for you and my affection for you will not change at all. Because they're after me, they're not after you. The traditions, some of them, they say that Imam Hussein, in order to facilitate this, he turned off the lights, the candles, so that those who want to leave, they can leave without shame, without judgment. The companions, they turned to one another. Then they turn to Abu Abdullah and they say, Abu Abdullah, what is this request and suggestion that you make of us? We are your loyal companions. We know very well what is in store for us tomorrow. Ya Aba Abdullah, do you really expect for us, in times of goodness and glory, we were standing with you and we lived with you, and now during this time of need that we would abandon you? Never, Ya Aba Abdullah. Never, even if they were to take us tomorrow and they would cut us into thousands of pieces, and they would take us and they would burn us, and this would happen again and again and again to us, we would never desert you and abandon you, Ya Aba Abdullah. Allahu Akbar. What iman, what loyalty, what love they had to their Lord and to their Prophet and to the grandson of their Prophet. What integrity and honesty they had, that they displayed this loyalty to Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. And the next day came. And these companions, they had honor. The two major groups on the side of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they were his companions, his followers, and his family members. His brothers, his sons, his nephews, his own family members, Banu Hashim. Now Banu Hashim, they were honorable. They were the descendants of the Holy Prophet and the descendants of Ali ibn Abi Talib. They had courage. They had honor. So Banu Hashim, on that day, they prepare themselves for battle. They are the first that are going to stand in line of defense of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. But the companions are there. And the companions are also honorable. How will we allow Banu Hashim, the descendants of the Prophet, the descendants of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the family of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, how will we allow them to go out before us? We stay alive and they go to their deaths. Impossible. So they turn to Aba Abdullah and they say, Aba Abdullah, we go out first. And one by one they go out so valiantly, so courageously. Allahu Akbar. They go out and one by one they fall to the ground. And with each one who falls to the ground, Imam Hussein, and he goes and he expresses his love for him in his own unique way. When Habib ibn Madahir falls, Habib, who was the beloved of Aba Abdullah. Habib was the friend of Aba Abdullah. He was a childhood friend of Aba Abdullah. You know this? When Habib was a child, Imam Hussein was a child in Medina, Habib, he would follow Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. He would take the dust from the ground that Aba Abdullah would walk on and he would wipe it on his face. This was Habib to Aba Abdullah. So when he falls, Imam Hussein rushes to him. My Habib. Habib means beloved. You are my Habib. You are my beloved. When Joan, when he falls, that former slave, when he falls, Imam Hussein rushes to him. He tells him, oh Joan. He places his cheek on the cheek of Joan. Allahu Akbar. What a beautiful gesture. When Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, when he comes to the side of Aba Abdullah, Al-Hurr, who maintained that honor. He's an inspiration because he did not compromise. While others, Umar ibn Sa'd, he stands there and he says, I am between two things. I am between, on the one hand, gaining the governorship of Ar-Ray, that major city at the time. I've been promised I'm going to be the leader of Ar-Ray, and this is something that is dear for me. I look forward to this. But on the other hand, I am facing the murder of the grandson of the Prophet. And what does Umar ibn Sa'd choose? He sells his soul. He sells his soul. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does he give him governorship of Ar-Ray? No, Umar ibn Sa'd perishes. He sells his soul and he loses this life and he loses the hereafter. Whereas Al-Hurr bin Yazid al-Riyahi, he stands there trembling. His soldiers, they come to him, they tell him, "Oh Hurr, there is no one more brave than you in Kufa. You are the bravest. How is it that you stand here and tremble?" He says, "Because I am seeing myself between hellfire and paradise. And by Allah, I will never choose hellfire over paradise." He comes to Abu Abdullah. He seeks his forgiveness. Abu Abdullah accepts. He says, "Yes, Ya Hurr, if you are sincere, Allah repent." Al-Hurr, he tells him, "Ya Abu Abdullah, I'm not coming down from my horse." Immediately now he turns to the battlefield and he goes out and he fights valiantly until he falls. He calls out, "Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah." Imam Hussein comes rushing to Al-Hurr. He comes down to him. He takes the head of Al-Hurr. He places it in his lap. He wipes the dirt and blood off of Al-Hurr's face. And then he says, "Oh Hurr, congratulations. Yes, your mother called you Hurr, which means free. And that's, yes, you are free in this life and in the hereafter. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله وسلم عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. All together, let us pay our respects. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. And for the souls of all of the marhumin, mu'mineen and mu'minat from among our family and friends and community members, we recite Surah Al-Fatiha مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد.